Welcome back, everyone. Today we're gonna go over some early game compositions. Based on some of the last few guides I've done, I've gotten a lot of feedback on the nuances of the game and how to break into different areas. One of my big tips for the beginner mistakes videos was trying to force an end game comp too early on in the game. And I talked a little bit about early game versus mid game comps and transitioning into late game comps. And I think transitioning is gonna be a whole other video as well. But in this video, I wanna talk specifically about early game comps, and then I'll start working on a mid game comps kind of video. And so we'll go through basically 3 size teams and how you can make those 4 size teams and how those comps work together, because there's a lot of really great options for the beginning of the game that are very item dependent. But I think what comes out of that is the items you create are stuck with you for the whole game. So one of the things I'm gonna caution you about with these early game comps is making sure that you create the items that are gonna be valuable all game long. You don't really wanna overcommit to a specific build with items in the very early game unless you're trying to get really big win streaks. Because say you make a frozen heart or two, and then later you're gonna regret it because you wish you used those chain vests for guardian angels, because guardian angels are just stupid strong right now. In fact, almost every build that is in the top ladders requires at least 1 or 2 guardian angels. And if you made thorn mails or frozen hearts early on, it's really gonna hurt. So let's jump right into early game builds and what they look like. The first one that I wanna talk about, which is probably the epitome of early game builds, and that's gonna be nobles. The only time you can run 3 nobles, unless it's accidentally because it's part of a different synergy, is gonna be early game. 3 nobles is probably one of the best starting builds you can have, because depending on which unit gets that noble buff, you will end up winning a lot of rounds because it's so valuable. Not only are you getting armor and magic resist, but on top of that, you're getting lifesteal. It's like getting a free bloodthirster on a unit. So when you're looking at nobles, you're gonna wanna ideally get Garen, Vayne, and Lucian. Those are your best 3 nobles. And that's because Fiora is just not as good as the other 3. So for items specifically, I'm gonna recommend that you always make items in the early game that are gonna be useful all game long. And so for Garen, that's gonna be Morello's, Guardian Angel, or Thornmail. These are items that you're gonna use for a lot of different builds and can work great. And then for the Vayne, you can put Static Shiv, which works great on a lot of builds and works great in Ranger builds as well. And then just general attack speed items like Rapid Fire Cannon or Rage Blade. And then for Lucian, I wouldn't, if you're running nobles, jump straight into a Gunslinger build if you get the Lucian. So safe builds for him, or any of the items you would put on Vayne, work well on Lucian as well, because you know that if it doesn't pan out, you can sell him and get those items back. So Static Shiv, RFC, Rage Blade, but you can also make a Ludens or a Gunblade for him. Both these items work great on Lucian and will usually carry you through the early game. When it comes to positioning, I would recommend putting the Garen up front, the Vayne inside the middle, and then the Lucian on the outside, because even if assassins jump on Lucian, he's still gonna be able to dash away and it'll work great for him. The next early game build that works great is Void, especially right now with how strong Void is. And that's gonna be Kassadin, Kha'Zix, and Rek'Sai. You put these 3 together and all 3 of them will do true damage currently with their abilities and their attacks. So Rek'Sai will be able to do true damage with the burrow, or she'll be able to get in there. Kha'Zix will do true damage with his hit, and then Kassadin obviously will be doing true damage with every hit, which is excellent. When it comes to the Void build, I would recommend focusing items on Kassadin or Kha'Zix, and that's gonna be a Bloodthirster, Rage Blade, RFC, because again, these items transfer very well into later stages of the game. Or if you're really strapped for it, you can get a Phantom Dancer. Now, say you're in the early game, you have this Void build going, and you are getting a bunch of Giants belts, you can put a Warmogs on Rek'Sai. The only risk there is Warmogs only works in maybe 3 or 4 builds at endgame. And so when you get to mid or endgame and you're not running that build and you have the Warmogs, it will be okay for certain units, but again, it gets countered by Morello's or red buff, which really sucks. And you also need to put it on a unit that has enough HP that's going to benefit from having that regeneration. Units like Shyvana are great for the Warmogs. You can even put it on other Brawlers if you're going for the Brawlers build, but I recommend focusing items on the Kassadin or the Kha'Zix. As far as positioning, I would put the Kha'Zix in the corner because he's going to jump over, and then put the Kassadin a little bit up front because you want him to stop any initiators that come forward, right? Most people put their initiators initiators up front like a Garen. And so if Kassadin starts by attacking the Garen, you'll usually be able to kill him before he can get his spin off. And then Rek'Sai is just there on the side to kind of distract assassins or really just get in the thick of it and deal damage. The next beginning game or early game build is going to be Knights. This one is a really great staple, and you can transition out of Knights very easily because if you keep 2 Knights and that add 1 or 2 other things to it, it's a very, very safe build since they reworked it in 9.15. So you want to focus on the Wonder Twins, Garen and Darius. These are excellent early game units that will have a lot of value. And then if you have 3 or you have a Mordekaiser, you can put him out. Mordekaiser isn't a great unit in and of himself, but he does give the Knight bonus. And of course, later, if you get a Kindred or a Karthus, you can get the Phantom bonuses as well, which is very powerful. So try to focus on Garen and Darius, but if you can't get them, or if you have an extra slot, put Mordekaiser in there as well. Items that work great for this: Garen, Morellos, GA, Thormail, as I mentioned before. Darius, Gunblade works great on him because it affects his attacks, but it also affects his spin, making it heal for even more. And then Mordekaiser, you can just put Phantom Dancer or anything that helps build that up. And if you are going to be building something early, Static Shiv is a great item. Even if the Knights don't attack as fast as some of the other units, it's still going to provide value. Next up is Gunslingers, and this is probably one of the more strong or more powerful early game builds. Starting with the 3, I would recommend Graves, Trist, and Lucian, because you're obviously not going to have Gangplank at this time. And previously, a couple patches ago, you really needed a Hush, a Curse Blade or 2, maybe multiple Hushes, and then a bunch of debuffs items that stack up together. Now, in 9.15, in the current state of the game, the only item that you need to make Gunslingers work is Red Buff. As long as you get Red Buff, you can actually use Gunslingers early on. The best unit to put it on is going to be Graves, and you put him up front so he can get a really good spread on everyone he hits with the cone. But if you can't get it on Graves based on the items or whatever, you can put it on Tristana as well. She's going to be attacking the most. Lucian dashes a lot and will shoot out an extra shot that isn't an on-hit effect, so generally putting it on Trist is better. But if you feel like you're getting a lot of Gunslingers and you're going to go for that 4 Gunslinger build, getting Hushes is huge. I see a lot of people recommending Cursed Blade, but honestly, I think Hush is a much better item. It's much more reliable, and when it comes to the very end of the game, when you have team sizes of 8 or 9, I'd much rather have a Hush than a Cursed Blade because team fights are won and lost by abilities. If Cho'Gath can't ult, if Sejuani can't ult, if Gnar can't ult, or you're up against shapeshifters, Hush is the item that you want. And again, for Lucian, Ludens and Gunblade work great. That will carry you through the early game as well. The Ludens procs every time he shoots, and the Gunblade keeps him alive. If you only get 2 Gunslingers, you can actually run an alternate build that I've been using. I call it Gunslinger Support. And essentially you just get a Trist and a Lucian if you can, and then you pair that with a Lulu. And the reason this works is you still get the 2 Gunslinger bonus, and so Trist and Lucian are going to be dealing a lot of damage. But if you can't get that Graves for the AoE, putting a Lulu in there works awesome because a bunch of assassins jump on Trist, Lulu's going to save her. Say Lucian gets into a bad spot, Lulu's going to save him. So it works really great if you can't get that 3rd Gunslinger. Another great beginning build is going to be Wild. This only works for a short period of time, so I wouldn't recommend sticking with Wild too long unless you plan on going Wild Sorcerer or Wild Shapeshifter with a Shyvana and a Gnar. But in the very beginning of the game, you can get a Warwick, a Nidalee, and Ahri. Ahri is actually probably one of the better units in the game, and if you can get the right items on her, pretty much the same items you'd put on a Cho'Gath, she can carry you until late game, and so this build works awesome. If you're gonna create items for these, I'd recommend building the very specific popular build right now for Ahri, which is Morellos, Guardian Angel, and then maybe a Rage Blade or a Luden's Echo. And you can easily sell Ahri later and give these items to a Karthus or a Cho'Gath. And if you're going to make items, you can put items on Warwick that you'll transfer off later. This could be a Warmogs, this could be a Static Shiv. And for Nidalee, I would just go ahead and make hyper carry items. She's not going to last you all game long, but again, you can sell her and transfer items like Bloodthirster, Rage Blade, or Rapid Fire Cannon to hyper carries like Rangers, maybe an Ashe, or if you're gonna go Draven later in the game, you can transfer all of these items to Draven and be just fine. Next up is gonna be Assassins. Sometimes you get stuck where everyone's buying all the really cheap win costs, and so this kind of lends itself to a really easy 3 Assassins start. The Assassins I would recommend are Pike, Kha'Zix, and Zed. They go very well together. You're going to get a lot of CC out of the Pike, some good damage out of the Zed, and then Kha'Zix, of course, hits really hard in single target. If you're going to make items for these, I would make hypercarry items for the Kha'Zix or the Zed with Bloodthirster, Guardian Angel. Zed and Kha'Zix work great with an Infinity Edge, but again, the Infinity Edge may not last you all game long. In fact, I would probably only get Infinity Edge if I was running Draven personally. I know some people run other builds, but even in 6 Assassin comps, I'd much rather get Shojins or Guardian Angels or other utility items. The IE is just too inconsistent to deal with. But again, if you're gonna get it early, putting Zed with a IE or a Kha'Zix with an IE, it works great. And then later on, if Assassins don't pan out, you can give that Infinity Edge to a Blade Master Tristana or to someone like a Draven that's gonna benefit from that crit. And then for Pike, you can obviously do Shojins, Guardian Angel, very easy items that will transfer later on to the game. This next one is actually really good right now because there's so many builds that are using Brawlers. And so if you start the game with Brawlers, you're gonna be able to transition into that mid game a lot easier. So this is gonna be a Warwick, a Rek'Sai, and a Blitzcrank. This works awesome because you're gonna get a lot of extra HP on every Brawler, which kind of shoves off static shivs or, you know, basic damage like that. For the Blitzcrank, you can put a Shojins on him very easily. It's also very popular to put a death cap on him because if you get him to 2-star and you put a death cap on him, he'll probably one-shot most units in the early stage of the game, and so he can be very terrifying with that. And then the death cap you can transfer to a Cho'Gath or an Aurelion Sol or a Karthus or an Ahri or any caster that you're going to want that extra damage on. For Rek'Sai and Warwick, again, I wouldn't recommend making items for them unless you know you're going to transfer them off, but if you really have to and you're starting to lose, you can make a Warmogs or a Frozen Heart or even a Phantom Dancer. These are very tanky items that help a lot. It's great for Warwick and Rek'Sai because they'll have pauses in the fight. Warwick will use his ult to jump and stun someone, and so that gives time for the Warmogs to tick. And same for Rek'Sai. Once she goes underground, the Warmogs will be ticking for her, and you'll get a lot of extra HP from that. Up next is Rangers. This build is probably the most contested. A lot of people love going Rangers, and if you get a lot of static shivs, you're almost forced into going it because it's just so good. So what you want to do is get a Vayne and a Varus, and then put a tank up front. Usually the best you can do is going to be a Braum if you get one early. If not, you can put a Garen or a Mordekaiser or a Darius. Any knight works really well because once you hit level 4, you can put out a second knight, and then you have 2 Rangers, 2 knights. A really, really great early game build to have. So with the Vayne and Varus, static shivs go a long way, but you can also do Rage Blades or Rapid Fire Cannons or Bloodthirsters, as I mentioned before. And personally, I love making a Seraphs for Varus because if he gets an ultimate off, he'll usually deal about half the HP of every unit on the board, if not just outright kill them. And so making a Seraphs works great because you can put a Seraphs on a lot of units in the mid and late stages of the game, and early on it just does a lot for him. And lastly, I want to make a small note for 3 Sorcerers to start the game. This is probably the riskiest of them all because a lot of times the 3 or 4 team size fights don't last long enough for your ability to make a difference, right? Because if the auto attackers are there, say you're going up against gunslingers or you're going against knights, a lot of times your sorcerers will die before they can cast their ultimate, and even if they get it off, it may not be enough to turn the fight around. But again, if everything else falls apart or you're not getting the units you want, you can put out a Kassadin, a Lulu, and an Ahri. Again, putting hypercarry items on Kassadin works great. Bloodthirster, Rapid Fire Cannon, Rage Blade, these kind of items. And then for Lulu and Ahri, Lulu I would put a Shojins or a Rage Blade because those items will transfer later. And then for Ahri, the same thing goes for your late game carry units. Morellonomicon, Guardian Angel. Ludens works great for her because she has a great attack speed and a lot of mana generation, and also a max of 75 mana, which is huge. And then you can put a Shojins or a Rage Blade, something to kind of just balance her out. And that's going to be it. These are the starting builds for 3 units that really easily get you wins in the beginning of the game, and also will transfer into builds later on. I'll start working on a mid-game comps guide and reference some of these early game builds and how you can transform them into a mid-game build later on. But these are the units and the items I'd recommend. I think the big thing is just looking for really easy synergies like Noble, or like Brawlers that can give you a great start. Knights are also super flexible because you only need 2 of them in the beginning, and they're very numerous. You're going to get a lot of Garens and Dariuses and Mordekaisers early on, and that can help you build other builds. And you can mix and match these two. Put 2 Knights and 2 Gunslingers out when you get to 4, and that'll work really well together. I think the big thing and the big piece of advice I would give to people that are looking for early game builds is try to create items that don't pigeonhole you into a specific build, because you're never going to know what your build is at the beginning of the game. The game is just way too random and way too chaotic for you to figure that out right away. So when you make very safe items like Bloodthirster, Morello's, Guardian Angel right now is probably the best item in the game and works in every single comp. Making these items means that when you have to transition to mid and late game, you can just sell the units you had early and use those excellent items for later on in the game. I'll also give a special mention to Ionic Spark. If you're gonna make an Ion Spark, the best time to make it is early on in the game when it actually will have a really big impact, and then it actually will help you go into mid game as well. Thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. If you have any other guides you'd like me to make, I'm in the swing of making content now, so please let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you're here for the first time, be sure to subscribe, like, comment, all those kind of things. Check me out on Instagram. I use my name, Rory Newbrough, on Instagram. I have a link down below in the description. And then check me out on Twitch as well. I stream 5-6 days a week now on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/drybear. And you can also do me a special favor and have an excellent day. I'll see you in the next one.